So looking ahead, I mean, I think, things are going to keep changing in marketing, and people are going to keep getting, new and different channels, different approaches. And I think it's about just really, again, going back to those business goals and thinking about what you want.
Welcome to Agents of Change, a podcast about the future of B2B marketing, featuring insights from executives at top agencies. I'm Danielle O'Neill with Leadtail. Let's hop on in. Hi, welcome to Agents of Change. I am Danielle O'Neill, and I'm excited to have Mike Maynard here joining me from Napier. They are a full-service PR-led marketing agency based out of the UK. So we're excited to have our guest from across the pond. Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on the podcast, Danielle.
So excited to have you here. I know that you've got a very extensive background ranging everything from digital to PR. I know you focus a lot on content and lead gen. And there's so much great information that you had on our initial discussion that I'm really excited to share with our audiences today.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, as an agency, we do quite a wide range of tactics. Our real focus is around the audience we reach. So we're all about selling technical products to technical decision makers. So that's what really sets us apart. And that's why we actually talk about a lot of different tactics and ways of, generating leads or raising awareness.
Absolutely. And, in conversations that we've had, I've been able to learn a little bit more about you, your approach, and Napier's approach specifically. And one area that we were talking about was metrics. And you had some really great insights around how Napier does their metrics and some of the different techniques and tactics. So would love to just dive into metrics on our discussion today first.
Definitely. So I used to be an engineer, and for a lot of marketing people listening to this, it's probably going to, make them feel a little uncomfortable because I actually love Excel. So, we love metrics, and coming from that engineering background and working with a lot of engineering companies, actually it means that a lot of our clients they understand metrics as well. So I think it's really important to get metrics right.
Yeah, absolutely. As we know, they're vital. All of our clients are always wanting to know the metrics. We need to understand the metrics in order to be able to do our jobs better. But I do think there's also a little bit of re-education when we're thinking about metrics and truly what matters most. And I know you've talked about that a little bit. Can you dive into that re-education process that you discussed?
Yeah, so I think, digital has been really interesting. Over the last 20 years, it's transformed metrics because we've gone from, a lot of activities that have had fairly limited data to digital, which produces this vast amount of data that you can use. But I think that the challenge is a lot of that data actually isn't particularly useful. So if you're sending an email, things like the open rate and even the click rate, that can be dominated by some of the malware bots that's checking email to make sure that there's nothing, untoward behind it. If you look at ads, again, click-through rates, fine, okay, you've got to click. What does that mean? Is it any good? To me, I think what really matters in metrics is understanding what the campaign is supposed to achieve and then measuring as close as you can whether you actually did what you wanted to do. It's always difficult because as soon as you move more towards business metrics rather than those marketing metrics, the timescales get longer. It gets more difficult to associate an activity with a business outcome. But the more you can do it, the better it is.
Agreed. And you kind of just hit the nail on the head there, is measuring them against what we are meant to achieve. I see a lot of times, particularly in agencies, we all have our own set of metrics. Here's what we are really measuring against. Here's what we are trying to accomplish and trying to find. But as we know, our goals can be different than our clients. And so, how do you approach that conversation of discovering what's important to you as the marketer, but also what's important to the client when they're looking at this?
Well, I think the first thing we try and do, and I'm not going to say we always manage to do it, but we try to always check our ego at the door. We don't want to walk into the client with, here's how you measure this campaign, here's what you do. What we want to do is talk to the client and really understand what the campaign means to them and what they want to achieve. And quite often it's not obvious. I mean, we had One client who did data center planning software. I mean, it really geeky, where do you put the servers in a data center? And they said, we want to appear in national newspapers in the UK. And we were like, why? Just why? It's crazy. Well, actually, as it turns out, they were looking to be sold. They were looking for an acquisition. So they wanted people in the financial sector in the UK to know the name. And actually, when you dig down and find out what people want to achieve and why they want to do it, often you go, totally get that. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I can tell you, I can reach a lot more of your customers through trade media or online, and I can do other things that look better and produce better numbers. But, 1 half-page article in the Telegraph, that's probably worth more to you than anything else I could do at this particular point in the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so key, is just understanding their why. And I know sometimes as marketers, we can forget their why when trying to measure against our own why. So how do you go about the goal aligning process with your clients?
So we actually have a formalized process of a 4-step process we use with our clients. And one of the things we do is we try not to just sit with marketing. We try to get sales involved as well, to get different perspectives. And we have 2 steps that are really about thinking about the situation before we rush into actually executing and delivering. So the first step is determine, which is like a situation analysis process. And then the next step is focus, which is about audience and messaging. And so we work through the determine phase, and typically in the determine phase, you're going to identify why you're doing this goal. So you might start off by actually trying to analyze the situation. The client might have budget to promote a product, and they might not actually have a very clear why, other than they want to sell more. But actually, as you do that determine phase, you might find there's a gap in the market they want to build. It's something that offers them technology leadership, or alternatively, there's a lot of competition. They need market share, and all of those will be very different. So that determine phase will then set your goals. We go through the focus phase to make sure we get the messaging and the target audience right. The deliver phase, which is doing the work. But as we're delivering, we also have this enhanced phase. So rather than running through a campaign at the end of the campaign going, here's the metrics and they're good or they're bad or whatever it is, we actually, whilst we're running the campaign, we try and use feedback from how well we're doing versus our metric to try and understand whether the campaign's working. And that can be tough because, as I said, business results often have a lag between the marketing activity and actually getting the sale. So sometimes you do need to use those intermediate metrics. How well are people engaging with the content might be, the only thing you can use during the campaign. And then afterwards, you can perhaps see how much you generated in terms of sales.
I really like that approach a lot, and especially the sales and marketing alignment, because I think that's something that we're all trying to figure out, is how we can pull in both departments and really get them not only bought in, but also both of them engaged on the full campaigns themselves.
I was going to say definitely. And one of the interesting things is, particularly, what's happened during the pandemic is that it's much harder in the business to business sector to go out and see people as a sales force. So yeah, what we've seen is that marketing has suddenly become massively important in business to business. And actually the salespeople now, they recognize there's less they can do in terms of that, earlier stage, earlier in the customer journey outreach. Customers don't want to talk to salespeople early in their journey. So they need marketing. And actually the smart salespeople are really proactive at coming to marketing and saying, we need you to do this, 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 and this, because this will drive an inquiry that then means I can get a meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we're seeing as well, is that, marketing is now taking a different role since the pandemic than what we were before, specifically in B2B, which is, both of our pain points really of where we spend all of our time. So when we're thinking about these goals and these different metrics, one point that you brought up in our earlier discussion was, we don't just need to focus on what we should be, but also let's talk about what we should not care about. There's those vanity metrics, and there's metrics that probably just don't mean anything. So how do you determine, one, what those vanity metrics that you don't really care about are, and then how do you align that with the client's goals?
Yeah, and I think, again, it comes back to digital. Digital produces all these numbers, and generally speaking, people look at numbers and go, "Well, bigger is better," of course, isn't it? And if you talk, even if you talk to like the LinkedIn advisors, the people in LinkedIn, they'll come up with things like, "Well, we recommend that a good LinkedIn campaign should have 300,000 as its audience size," and we'll sit there and go, "There's 3,000 people in the world that are going to buy this." We don't want 300,000. We don't want a big audience. We want a really small audience. And we want to get really engaged with a really small audience. So I think it's about being realistic about what you're trying to do. And our 4-step process, in that focus stage, really helps because we define who the audience is. We know who we're trying to reach. And then we can be really specific when we actually get to run the campaigns and when we get to evaluate it. And we might know that audience size is not important, which actually for a lot of B2B campaigns, the biggest issue is how much money you're wasting on people who aren't really the people you want to reach, because it's very hard to target a B2B audience down to people who are really going to be your customers. So it's all about, focusing down and thinking about what you want to achieve, rather than being seduced by, I can get this number bigger, or I can get this number looking better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And is there anything else that you would advise marketers as we're talking about goals and metrics and really looking ahead in just the marketing landscape and its changes right now?
So looking ahead, I think, things are going to keep changing in marketing, and people are going to keep getting, new and different channels, different approaches. And I think it's about just really, again, going back to those business goals and thinking about what you want, and not going for, the results that maybe boost your ego, but perhaps don't make any difference. So, one example is we looked at our newsletter. We run the email newsletter, which incidentally is probably our best lead generation tool that we run. Not very sexy, but actually, because people take a long time to switch agencies, it's really hard to keep engaged. The newsletter is a great way to do it. And we actually took out half of the recipients of our newsletter. They never opened the email. They never clicked on the email. They never did anything. We figured that, we could keep sending forever, and these people would still never read our emails. So why send to them? Let's focus on the people who are engaged. And so we've got a much more engaged audience on our email, where, basically everyone is engaging, at least once every, 4 or 5 emails, they're either, opening, clicking, or doing something. And that's produced much better results. And actually, because we're now really focused on the people who care, the people who are reading the email, rather than looking at stats for a lot of people that, perhaps, have the email go into spam and then never open it. We're actually much better at working out what topics are resonating and then building better newsletters for the future.
I really like that approach too. And, it's funny because if you talk to clients, I'm sure you've had some that are like, no, we don't want to discredit them. But to your point, what's the point of continuing to send to them if they're not going to open? So I like that approach of let's target the people that are actually interested in what we have to say.
Yeah, I think, there are issues with that sometimes. So it is easy as a company to focus just on emailing the people who are engaged in your database. It's kind of your fan club. So you will get great results there. You do need to look at expanding that audience. So you do need to look at going out to new people. But, imagining that someone who's never opened an email from you in the last 2 years is suddenly going to engage, that probably isn't going to happen.
Yeah. That's when you just have to go out and find those new people.
Yeah. So finding new people is important, going out and building your audience, building your database is super important. And that's a different thing. So it's about understanding, again, it goes back to why you're doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, while we're on the topic of differences, I want to shift gears a little bit here, because one of the things that I'm really fascinated by is the fact that you guys are PR led and that you really focus on the PR side. and how that marketing is different than traditional marketing. So I'd love to just hear a little bit more about that from the Napier side.
So I think that's really interesting. I mean, what we actually talk about to clients is we talk about content generation and content distribution. And traditionally, PR is a combination of the two. So it's generating content and then distributing it through the media. So we actually split those two activities out. And being PR led, we're very, very strong in terms of generating content, both written and visual. And we do a lot of work around that. We find a lot of our clients, they have, technical products that are being sold in a very technical application. They need a lot of information to explain what they do and why it benefits the customer. So there's a lot of content generation there, but also there's a lot of content distribution. Now, we've actually come from a background of primarily distributing that content through the media. And partly that was because when the agency was founded about 40 years ago, really the media was the primary way you distributed content in a business-to-business setting. We still do that. We still do that a lot. It's incredibly effective. But obviously now we've got a huge digital arm to our business. So what we're talking to clients about is, you're generating this content, it might cost you, a lot of money to generate a feature article that's going to be in your, top tier trade publications. Don't just stop there. Take that article and reuse it, make it into an ebook or make it into a white paper, and then promote it through digital channels as well. So that content reuse we're seeing as being, really important for a lot of clients. And actually the reality is most of our clients can't generate enough content. So, they're not short of ideas for promotion. They're short of ideas and particularly bandwidth to generate content. So we help them generate that content. And then we really multiply the power of it by actually reusing it in different formats and on different channels.
Yeah, we're big fans of create once, use many ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have a lot of clients that kind of run into that same where they just don't have the content engine. They may not have the same staff that they had years ago, or they're now being asked to do other things. And so really finding new uses of that content is what's driving it. You'd mentioned some of that digital content. So when you're talking digital, where else are you adding their content? Is it LinkedIn newsletters? What other locations?
So we're using it pretty broadly. So across paid and also organic social media. We're doing also an awful lot of direct marketing as well. So we work with a lot of clients with their marketing automation systems. And so we're helping them get out and do database marketing. So, realistically, those are probably two of the biggest channels outside of media. But really, again, it depends on what they're trying to do. Last week I was at a trade show, face-to-face event. It was in Germany. Germans love trade shows. And, you couldn't get through the aisles. I mean, it was packed. So again, don't think that things like trade shows or conferences are dead. Helping clients get, content out through physical or indeed virtual events as well as another channel.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. That's, you wouldn't put, at least I wouldn't think of content and a trade show kind of going hand in hand, but that totally makes sense. And that they're going to digest it there.
Yeah. I mean, a few years ago, we did a project with a client and we said, you've got these amazing articles on your blog. We think we should make an ebook out of it and use it as a lead gen tool. And the client was like, they're on our blog. Who's going to register? It's like, no. You've got to understand there's a convenience around packaging it as an ebook. And to be honest, at the time I was like, fingers crossed, I really hope this works because I wasn't sure it would. It turned out that not only was it their best lead gen item that I think they've ever produced in terms of number of leads, but they also ended up printing physical copies for trade shows. And they, again, generated massive number of leads because everyone was happy to give over a business card for this physical book that they printed. So much so that they actually ran out of books very, very quickly at the event. They'd underestimated. So I think, don't just be confined by, this is the way you do it. This is the modern way. Actually, sometimes some of the old formats for getting content out really work. And after COVID, actually, we all want to go and see people and talk to real people. So, physical events are actually still important.
What a fantastic idea. I'm going to add that to our own event arsenal. Thanks, Mike. So we know that Napier has a lot of great ideas and that you're progressive and forward thinking. One particular area that got me perked up when we were talking initially was the fact that Napier is different in the fact that you guys are 70% ownership coming from your employees. And I know that as more and more agencies are looking at different ways to kind of manage their agencies, this might be something they're looking at. So what made you lead to that decision? And then also, what advice would you give to agency owners seeking to do the same?
I'm so pleased you asked me that, Danielle. So it was about 6 months ago we decided to become an employee-owned business. So previous to that, I'd owned the business. And there were a couple of reasons for that. But really, it's all about giving the opportunity to the staff at the agency to not only benefit from success of the agency, so through having an ownership and therefore having access to a proportion of the profits, but it's also giving them a say in how the agency goes forward. Actually, we employ a lot of smart people. And then in businesses, sometimes we go, well, we're running it. And, you can come and talk to me if you've got ideas, but really it's kind of my business. And so I'm going to do what I want. And, even though you're smart, just sit in the corner. And that's really wrong. I mean, there's so much you miss out on by not having employees fully involved. So we're now in a situation where, because the employees have a majority shareholding, like anybody else who has a majority shareholding, they have the ability to remove the officers of the company. So theoretically, the employees, or in fact, practically, the employees can sack me. So it's a little bit of pressure, but it also means that they realize they have a real say in the business going forward. And I think that's reflected in the way that they, are much more committed and much more engaged in some of the bigger issues of the business rather than perhaps their day-to-day roles.
I love that. I think that's it's got to add such a different way to work almost. And when your employees are coming to work, it's not just coming to work, it's having true ownership in what they're doing.
Yeah, and actually in the UK, we're lucky because there's a government scheme that encourages this. So it makes it easier for you to create this employee ownership. And the neat thing is the employees are beneficiaries, but actually there's no real taxation involved in terms of moving shares backwards and forwards and things like that. So it's from a UK point of view, it's wonderful because it's incredibly tax efficient.
That's so cool. I love that so much. So you had mentioned how you have a lot of specialists on your team, that everybody is kind of an expertise in what they're doing. And that allows you to open it up to partnership with other agencies. So can you talk a little bit about what some of those partnerships have looked like? And then what advice you would give the kind of do's and don'ts about partnering with others?
So that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think the first thing to say is, even though I think Napier is wonderful, I know we can't do everything. So we need to either partner with other people, or alternatively, we're going to let our clients pick other people. But then we still have to work with them. So I think, to be successful as an agency, you've got to understand, what you're good at, and then understand the bits that you aren't good at, you actually aren't good at. So don't imagine that you should be getting all that business. So, there's lots of areas where we partner. So some of them might be geographical. So we work with a variety of agencies around the world where we need, support. We have not and are never going to be present in China or Singapore or Japan. So we need partners there, and we can choose to either, kind of have a wall between the two agencies or actually try and work together. The same thing is, where we look at, in other places in America where we need partners, but also in terms of expertise as well. So if we look at areas of expertise, we do a very small amount of website development around WordPress. But anything else, it's not what we're good at. We shouldn't be doing it. It's not our expertise. So, there's a lot of partnerships there on the digital side with dev agencies and people like that. So it's all about understanding that as an agency, there's two ways you can approach this partnership. And one is a competitive approach, which is I'm going to try and prove I'm more valuable than you as the other agency. And that's a terrible idea, because all that happens is you end up fighting internally against the other agency and not delivering results. The other one, which is, collaboration, or as I like to call it, if it's okay, I'm going to steal all your brilliant ideas and use them for what I'm doing, and you can do the same with me. And it works really well, and you can be really open about this is what we're doing, this is why we're trying to do it. In fact, I've just come off a call with a client that we introduced a new technology product to them for ebooks, and they're so excited they're actually going to have other agencies creating content in this format. Would I like that business? Yeah, of course I would. Could I support all of the business that they have there? Probably not. I probably don't have enough resources. And am I happy that I'm seen as the agency that brought this brilliant innovation into the client, and the client is now loving it and getting great results? Well, that's fantastic. So yes, it's not always, I'm going to win as much as I can. Sometimes you've got to be prepared to share. But I think once you do that, then the size of the cake grows. And so whilst you might only have a share, you've got a share of a much, much bigger cake.
I like that a lot. We also partner with agencies, and some of the things that we found too is it has to be that true collaboration. To your point, if there's any sort of infighting, if there's any sort of competitive feeling between, it's never going to work out. But if you can come in together as a unified front, all with the same goal of the client satisfaction in mind, it can work so much better.
Absolutely. And I think as agencies as well, we always have issues with conflicts. We have clients who aren't prepared to sit with, somebody who's coming as new business. We need to share some of that business around. And to me, if I was a client and I was trying to judge how well my agencies were working, I'd get them all in a room and I'd see who was smiling. And the agencies that are smiling and were friendly with the other agencies, they're the guys you want to keep. The agencies that are, standoffish, and it's like, I'm doing my stuff and I'm not talking to you, you guys, your competition, they're not going to help you as a client in the long term.
Yep. Agree wholeheartedly. So last thing that I want to touch on before I let you go is Napier. You'd mentioned right before we started recording that there's a funny story around how Napier got their name. So I'm dying to hear it.
So, it's really interesting. So I actually bought the agency in 2001. Top business tip, don't buy a technology agency 2 weeks before the .com crash. It's not good timing. And it was called Napier. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. I wonder why. And it was formed by two people who were married. And I talked to them. I said, well, why'd you call it Napier? Oh, we just like the name. And then I asked somebody who really knew. And they said, well, what you've got to understand is that when the agency was formed, these two people were married to other people and they were having an affair. And one of them had a flat in Napier Mews in London. And obviously back in, 1980, there was a lot of postal email, and they went, we should call it Napier, because then the address would be Napier Mews, London. Sounds great, and that's how it's called Napier. And that's why it was started as well.
That is a phenomenal story. Well, that's the thing you pull out at cocktail parties, right?
It's absolutely true. I mean, sometimes when we're talking to clients that seem a bit more straight-laced, we'll talk about, well, Napier was a mathematician in Scotland, and obviously we wanted to reflect some of the British innovation from it. But actually, that's the real story. It was all about two people wanting to get together, and fortunately, they did, and they married, and it all ended, happily ever after, like the best fairy tale.
That is phenomenal. And with that, Mike, I think we're going to wrap up on that great story that all of us can now take to our own cocktail parties.
Thanks so much, Danielle. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Mike. We really enjoyed your time today. And thank you so much for coming. It's been so great getting to know you. And I look forward to speaking with you more.
Thank you.